I think as filmmakers and cinematographers, we're all chasing that perfect shot. You know, some people describe that perfect shot as cinematic or filmic, but regardless of whatever people say, I think we all want the type of shot that when people watch it, they say, wow, that shot's amazing. Or it evokes a deep emotion within them, whether it's like, man, that's beautiful, or just, wow, just wonder. And I think a big part of getting to that point with your cinematography is focusing on composition. So today I want to share 3 things that I have implemented into my cinematography to hopefully, move myself further down the road in that aspect. And hopefully you'll find these tips helpful too. My first tip in getting good composition really has to do with how you frame your shot. And this is literally like, what are you putting in your shot? When you set up your camera and you look around, like what is going to be in your frame? And this is huge. I kind of liken it to if you're gonna sit down and paint something, you think about what are you gonna paint? What are you gonna see? Like if you're thinking, oh, I'm gonna paint like a mountain landscape, you have to decide, where is the horizon gonna be? Are there gonna be clouds in your shot? Like how much of the mountain you're gonna see? And it's very much the same thing when you're setting up a frame in filmmaking. So there's lots of different principles that help with framing, a lot of different techniques like, frame within a frame, or leading lines, or having balance, using symmetry. There's lots of these topics that I could do a deep dive on, and they deserve a deep dive, so feel free to go look them up. But the biggest one that I'm going to talk about that I think is really foundational is the rule of thirds. If you employ this, I can guarantee you this will get you probably 75% of the way to making your images just look better, look more cinematic, if you will. And the rule of thirds, in its most simple terms, is you divide your frame with 4 different lines, and at the intersection of these lines is where you want to place your subject or the thing of most interest in your shot. So for example, even looking at this shot, I am on one side of the frame, and if we divide it with our lines here, you can see that I am very close, if not on the intersection of one of these thirds. And just like with anything, like, whether you're shooting a narrative piece or you are shooting a product video or whatever the case is, thinking about things with the rule of thirds is really going to help you in just your composition and really, like I said, laying a good foundation for you to build a good composition upon. So my next tip, along with framing and like what you put in your shot, is actually how you create depth in your shot. Now I know immediately your mind will probably go like depth of field, and you're like, oh, I need to shoot with a super shallow depth of field, but honestly, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm really talking about the idea of like, how can you position your camera, put stuff in your frame that conveys depth in your shot. Essentially, we're taking a 2D image that you're seeing on a screen, and we're trying to trick our minds into believing that it is a 3D space, because it is a 3D space. And there's lots of different things that we can do in our composition to help create a sense of depth. Like I said, everything doesn't have to be shallow depth of field. Honestly, I kind of feel like it's a little bit overused. It's a cool trick in a bag of tools that we have. But if you're working on a film set or anything where there's an art director and there's people who have worked on costumes or sets or stuff, if you shoot with a shallow depth of field, like, 1.8, 1.4, you're gonna blur all that stuff out and you're not gonna be able to see anybody's hard work, and that just kind of defeats the point. When you look at most film sets, it's like they're shooting usually like f4 at the minimum. So again, there's lots of different ways that you can create depth in your shot. Something I like to do to create depth in my shot is to really think about, where is the subject in relation to the rest of the environment? Again, like, you don't want to just blur everything out, but if you can do things to show context, like if you can shoot in a way where there is space behind your subject that gives context to where they are. Whenever I'm shooting something, whether it's an interview, narrative, product. Always pull things away from walls. Try to shoot into more open areas where you can see further into things. It just, again, gives a sense of being in a 3D space, even though we're looking at a 2D image. Another thing that I do is what some people call like shooting dirty, where you introduce a little bit of stuff in the foreground. So like maybe like you're shooting through trees, or you know, you're shooting over a chair or under a table or something where it catches, you know, some part of the frame. And it's not the focal point, but you can still kind of see it's like, oh, like there's other things around this space. Again, helping to build context to where you are. So this scene, for example, you know, there is some depth of field in here. I'm not opposed to using depth of field, but hopefully you can see that I am in my car. You can see the outside of the car, shooting through it. You see some background lights over here, you know, some lights in my backyard. And so you have a little bit more context to where I am. You don't fully know, but you know that the image looks a little bit more alive than if I just would have been close up on me in my face, and you wouldn't really know, where is he? What is he doing? Why is there light shining in weird ways? But you see that I'm in my car, and so things kind of make sense, you know, contextually to where I'm at. And the third point that I think is super important to composition has to deal with lighting and color. And that might seem a little bit strange, because you might be saying to yourself, Corey, this video you're talking about composition and now you're bringing up lighting. And that's because for me personally, I can't talk about composition. I can't set up a shot and do framing and talk about depth and how I'm gonna get that in my shot without talking about how light and color are going to affect my image. I think light and color are so tied to composition. When you set up your frame, you're looking at, where is the light coming from in the image? How is it hitting the subject? Is it doing something interesting? What are the ratios between light and dark areas in my frame? You know, you're looking for that contrast. Or even sometimes with colors, there might be something where a color just really pops in a scene or a scenario, and you're like, I want to highlight that. Maybe there is a cool light pattern coming through a window, and that informs like where you actually frame your shot. And light and color are just, they're so important. They're so tied to composition. And I honestly believe, of all the tips I've talked about in this video, which are good, I think the people who understand this one, particularly about lighting, and they understand how to work with light, how to control it, whether that's light that you bring in to light a scene, or that's just natural light in the environment. And I think those people who understand those principles of lighting and color really create some of the strongest compositions that we see in the films that we love. So those are the three big things that I really try to focus on in my compositions: the framing, creating depth in my shots, and really working with light and color to make a strong composition. Hopefully you can take something from this video and start incorporating it into your filmmaking, your cinematography, and we can all collectively take steps closer towards getting that perfect shot. If you found this video helpful or just enjoyable, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to Reel Filmmaking for more stuff coming about filmmaking like this, cinematography, magic lantern cameras, all that goodness. And until next time, keep making movies and watching movies, and I'll see you on Reel Filmmaking.